it's been a hot minute since I've done a reading wrap-up. I was looking back at my channel and the last wrap-up I did was in February, I think. I'll link that one up here. But now it is July 5th. So how many months has that been? It's been like 5 months since I've done a wrap-up. So I thought I'd share with you, all of the books I read in the past 5 months. Alright, so going all the way back to March, the first book I read in March was Lore by Alexandria Bracken. I'm pretty sure I told you guys that I was not impressed with this while reading it. Overall, I gave this book a 2-star review, which is pretty sad. I expected a lot more from Alexandria Bracken. I love her other books. She wrote The Darkest Minds. She wrote Passenger and Wayfarer, loved those. But this one just was not it. It just was not very good. I apologize if you loved it, but it just wasn't it for me. This book is a Greek mythology story of sorts. Every year the gods are sent down to Earth to be punished for their crimes against humanity, and all these families descendant from the ancient Greek heroes try to kill the gods, and if you kill the god you gain their power and become like a god yourself. I'm sure you've heard about this book, unless you've been living under a rock. This came out, I think, maybe in February. I don't know. It just was not very good for me. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't like it. The second book I read in March was Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. Y'all know I love Cassandra Clare. Her books are just so good. I love this series so much. Chain of Gold was just phenomenal last year. Chain of Iron did not disappoint. I have an entire book review, which I think is a little bit of a jumbled mess because I just had so many thoughts and feelings, but I'll leave that book review either up here or down in the description below if you want to go check that out. Chain of Iron was so good. I loved it. So good. I just love these characters so much. After Chain of Iron, I read a book for one of my creative writing classes called Run Me to Earth by Paul Yoon. This book was really good. It was very moving, very touching. It was beautifully written. We learned a lot from it in class. I highly recommend this book. But this follows several different people in Laos during the Vietnam War. If you didn't know, during the Vietnam War, I think it was North Vietnam tried to attack the South by going through Laos, and so the Americans bombed Laos like crazy, like constant bombing, and this bombing just destroyed so many people's lives, and this mainly follows orphans who were affected by the bombing. It was just so good. I learned so much. I didn't even know about the secret war going on in Laos where there's like hundreds and thousands of bombs just still out there in present day. All these bombs are just sitting in the grass waiting to be stepped on. It's horrible. It's horrifying. But this book was very good. I highly recommend it. The next book I read in March was also very good, and that is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig? I don't know how to say their last name. I'm so sorry, Matt. But this book was absolutely phenomenal. I read it for book club and it was just so good. It's a story about second chances and learning to love yourself and learning to love life, and just, oh, it was so good. This book follows Nora Seed, who is, how old is she? She's probably like in her 30s or something like that. Still a young woman. She's struggling with her life, she's pretty miserable, and she tries to commit suicide. When she dies, she goes to the Midnight Library, which is this place which feels sort of between heaven and earth. And in the Midnight Library there are all of these books with all the different lives she could have led. All of her choices could have taken her on a different path. So she opens the different books, and when she reads the books of that particular life, she gets transported into it and gets to have a chance to live as that version of herself. She tries out all these different lives, and in all of them, there's something that's just not quite right. And she keeps getting kicked out of that life to find one where she'll finally be happy. So it's just a self-discovery journey, a journey of finding happiness, and it was just so moving and so touching and so good. I apologize, that's my clock going off. It is very intense, so trigger warning if you need it for this book. The first couple chapters were really intense, but it was definitely worth the read, and I encourage you to power through it and read it because it's just so good. And, you know, just a story about finding happiness in your life. The final book I read in March was Circe by Madeline Miller. This was also phenomenal. I read I read Song of Achilles in February, I think, and I loved that one as well. Circe was beautiful. Madeline Miller's writing is just so poetic and pretty. So good. This is the story of Circe from Greek mythology. Madeline Miller just kind of takes her own version of it. It's very good. I highly recommend. So March was a really good month with the exception of Lore because that was just not good, but the rest of them were really good. So let's see what April brought for us. So this next book is technically a March and April book, we'll just say that, and that is The Thousandth Floor by Katharine McGee, and this was so good, you guys. I remember this coming out years ago when I was in high school and everyone was reading it. I kept seeing it in Target back in the day. That was 2016 when it came out. Okay, so I'd never picked this book up, and finally someone gifted it to me, and so I read it, and it was so good. This is a somewhat dystopian, futuristic drama, I would say. This reads just like a trashy reality TV show. All these people are super rich, living in a futuristic New York City in this gigantic building with 1,000 floors, and it's a bunch of high schoolers just having a bunch of drama, and it's very good. That's all you need to know. And throughout the rest of April, I read the other 2 books in the series, which are called Dazzling Heights and The Towering Sky. So I read the entire trilogy in April, and it was just so much fun. It was so addicting. This book was just delicious. If you want something super easy to read and somewhat trashy reality TV vibes, definitely pick up this book. If you didn't know, this is the same author who wrote American Royals, which I also absolutely love, and those are also reality TV trashy vibes, which sometimes is just what you need. So these books were great. This book and the rest of the trilogy, I enjoyed all of them. And then the next book in April I read was another book for my creative writing class, and that is There's Something I Want You to Do by Charles Baxter. This is a collection of short stories which all somewhat interweave with each other. Some of the characters repeat, they're all in the same city. These are just short stories about life, really, and people wanting to be happy. Just really basic, mundane life stories, but they were really good. So if you're taking a creative writing class and you want to do some reading from a great author, read something by Charles Baxter. Continuing with April. March and April were really good months. I read The Peacock Emporium by Jojo Moyes. This is the author who wrote Me Before You, and she also wrote The Girl You Left Behind, both of which I loved. The Peacock Emporium was not quite as good as those other 2 books for me. This story is a really sweet story. It follows pretty much 2 different timelines. You have a woman in the 60s and a woman in modern day, a mother and daughter duo. And it's just, again, their search for happiness in their life. The present day daughter, she owns a little shop in this small little town she lives in, and she calls it the Peacock Emporium. She just sells all kinds of random things, but it brings the community together, and it brings just joy and happiness to these people. It was a very sweet book. It was a little confusing because it kept switching perspectives in time, and I didn't always know who was who and what was going on. So it took a lot of concentrating, but I enjoyed it. I did like it. I probably gave it like a 3-star review maybe. Again, not my favorite book by her, but still a feel-good book, even though you really had to concentrate to figure out what was happening. And the last book I read in April was a very surprisingly good read, and that is Eye Contact by Kami McGovern. I say this is very surprising because I got this in a blind bag from my library. You could buy a bag of like 5 books and all you know is the genre, so I picked up a $5 bag of adult fiction, I think, and this was in there, and I had no idea what it was about, but I decided to read it, and I'm so glad I did because it was very, very good. So this is a somewhat murder mystery. The 2 children who are in like 3rd grade, I think, they disappear into the woods at playground one day. One of them comes back, and the other one, the girl, dies. Now the boy has autism, and when the murder happens and people start asking questions, he retreats and goes almost nonverbal. So the book follows the murder mystery that's going on, but it also follows this mother's journey as she tries to deal with her son who is autistic, who's closing up, who's losing all the progress he has made because of the trauma of this murder. And it's just really, really intriguing. It's very good. So you've got family stuff going on and a murder mystery. I liked it a lot. It was a very surprising read. You should go check it out. Okay, so that was all for April. Now we're moving into May. In May, I only read 3 books. So the first book I read in May was an absolute 5-star perfection book, one of my new favorites, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This book was phenomenal. People have been raving about it for months, so I expected it to be good, but it just hit different. It was just beautiful. It was beautifully written. The characters were just so lovable. The story was fantastic. It just warms my heart. It's such a feel-good, sweet story, and it's laugh out loud funny. Fantastic. 10 out of 10. Go read it. So our main character, Linus Baker, works for the department in charge of magical youth, and his job is to go to these orphanages where magical youth live and make sure that everything is, you know, running smoothly. And he gets sent to go check out this one orphanage, and his entire life just kind of gets turned on its head. He realizes that people are so much more than their differences, and he learns love and finds a family, and it's just so, so good. The next two books I borrowed from the library, and that is Serpent and Dove and Blood and Honey. Both of these books have me conflicted because I don't love them. I didn't think they were anything special, but I was intrigued enough to read the second book after reading the first, and I have every intention to read the third book and figure out what happens at the end of this trilogy. So if you haven't seen these books floating around, I don't know where you've been. They've been super popular recently. They are young adult fantasy novels about a witch hunter and a witch bound in matrimony. That's really all you need to know. It's just like the struggles of their lives, and, you know, the witch has got to prove to everyone she's not a monster, and they've got to change the world. You know, generic young adult fantasy stuff. I don't think it deserves all the hype that it has received recently. I don't think it was anything terribly special, but again, it was intriguing enough for me to read the second book. So let me know your thoughts down below. That gets rid of May. Now let's move on to June. In June, I only managed to read 2 books, which is very much not like me. But I've been really busy with work. I started a summer job, which is super great. I love my job, but I'm there like every day, so I don't have as much time to read, which is kind of sad, but it's okay. I read 2 good books in June though. And the first one is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Oh my gosh, so good. Of course, Taylor Jenkins Reid is just amazing. If you haven't read her other books, Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, you definitely should. They've been getting a lot of hype recently, and they're very deserving of it because they're so good. Her latest book, Malibu Rising, follows a family in the 1980s. There's, how many siblings? There's like 4 siblings. They have a famous dad. The dad's kind of out of the picture. And they're all growing into adulthood. So the oldest is like 25 maybe, the youngest is 20. Every year, they throw a party at the end of the summer. And it's this huge, massive party. Anyone who's anyone from Hollywood comes. And this year, things get a little bit out of hand because by the end of the night, the entire coast of Malibu is on fire. Now this book is set up so you watch like hour by hour what's happening, trying to figure out how you get to this giant fire at the end. It's very good. A story of family and drama and 1980s Malibu. If you've read Taylor Jenkins Reid's other books, then you will like this one as well, I'm sure. So pick it up. So after that one, I read The Lion's Den by Catherine St. John, and this was very good as well. This book gives me like soap opera drama vibes. It's like an easy summer thriller read. It's somewhat thriller, mainly drama. So this woman, Belle, goes on a trip with her friend Summer, where they spend a week on a yacht with Summer's boyfriend, John. But John is very old. He's like 60-something years old, and he's very rich. So Summer is basically, you know, just dating him for the money, okay? And Belle doesn't agree with Summer's decision to date this old man, but she decides to go along for the free yacht trip. But suddenly things are not quite what they seem on this trip. Like, she's getting locked in her cabin at night, people are being very hush-hush about things, there's a lot of suspicion going around. So Belle tries to uncover what's really going on with John and why, and what's up with John's sketchy business. It's just fun, drama, intriguing. It's a great summer book. Like, if you're just chilling by the pool, you should read this. Okay, so now it brings us to July. It's only July 5th today, but I've already finished a book, and that one was Lovely War by Julie Berry. And oh my gosh, this book was so good. I'm still kind of in that slump after you finish reading, because I just finished it a couple hours ago. But you know when you just finish a really good book and you just can't think about anything else? That's how I feel. This book is fantastic. So this book follows 2 love stories during World War I, but they are narrated by Aphrodite and a couple other gods in World War II setting. So Aphrodite narrates the stories of these two couples from World War I, and it's just touching and moving. It's so beautiful. This book has a really cool setup as well because it's divided into acts. Which is pretty cool. And then you get a couple other gods come in and narrate, and they're all telling the story of these two couples in World War I. And it's just so beautiful, and I cried like 10 times in this book because it just, oh, it's so good. It's so good. If you need a good cry, read this book because it's beautiful and lovely and so sad. But that's all the books that I've read in the past 5 months. Sorry I haven't updated you. I'm going to try to be better about that. Anyways, thanks for watching my video. I'm Angelina, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.